Hello, my name is Jan Kovach, and I'm a League of Women Voters member. And we'd like to welcome you this evening. We're so happy that you've come, and we want to welcome our panelists who are willing to share their information with us. First, I'd like to introduce Megan Klein Hewitt, who's the Adult Service Manager for the library.
Thank you, Jan. We just want to welcome you all to Ames Public Library for tonight's event, Breaking News Local Media on Life Support, brought to you in partnership with Ames Public Library and the Ames and Story County League of Women Voters. As Jan said, I'm Megan Klein Hewitt, the Adult Services Manager here at the library, and our mission is to connect you to the world of ideas, which we do through diverse and inclusive resources and programming like tonight's event. We invite you to join us for future programs, which you can learn more about through our current issue of Page 1 at the table by the door, or by signing up for our events email. And comments on our programs, collections, and services are always welcome. And there's a comment box at that same table. And there are also materials related to tonight's topic. So don't hesitate to grab something if it interests you and check that out. That's welcome. You're welcome to do that. Tonight's event is being recorded and will be posted to the Ames and Story County League of Women Voters Facebook page. And I will turn it back over to Jan, who will be our moderator for tonight's event.
Thank you. I'm a former teacher, and I haven't done this in a long time, so I may be a little rusty, but I'm doing my best. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization made up of men and women who want to protect and promote our democracy. The purpose of our session tonight is, and we have sort of a statement, a thriving and engaged community and a strong democracy is dependent upon factual and thorough coverage of local and national news. Throughout the country, there's been a decrease in local media coverage, creating news deserts. The media has been described as the fourth estate, with the idea that it is to act as a guardian of the public interest and as a watchdog on the activities of government. The League of Women Voters organized this panel to share the panelists' views on how the media is filling their role to inform public debate, both locally and nationally, while facing challenges such as distrust of the media, loss of advertising revenue, and audiences moving to online sites and shrinking news. The format for this evening is as follows. I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then each panelist will be given about 1.5 minutes to make a statement introducing themselves and talking about their organization's role in presenting the news. Then the League will give the panelists several questions that we prepared ahead of time and gave to the panelists so they could think about them. Then the audience will be given a chance, or you are being given a chance now, to write questions on cards which are available on the table next to the doors, and submit them, and then I will read the questions from up here and they will answer them. I will make a closing statement, and we hope to be done around 8 o'clock. So now we're ready to begin. Our panelists are Kim Norvell, who is the editor of Community Reporters at the Register and the Ames Tribune editor, our new Ames Tribune editor. Michael Buchea, who is the distinguished professor at ISU in journalism. Ann Kinsel, who is the chair of KHOI FM 89.1 communications or community radio. Susan Quezada is the public information officer for the city of Ames, Iowa. Kate Keeley is the editor of the Iowa State Daily, and she's a senior at Iowa State. And Mel Crippen is the program director of KASI. Whoops, did I mix those up? Is Mel at the end? There you are, Mel.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm at the end, they tell me.
He's close to the door.
I had some of the information for the titles not correct, so I wrote them in here and I'm trying to follow them. Program director for KASI 1430 iHeartRadio. So those are our panelists. We will start with Kim. And Kim, we'd like you to give a presentation.
Hi, nice to have you guys here. I'm Kim Norvell. I'm the editor of the Ames Tribune. Just newly implemented about 4 weeks ago, so just kind of getting my feet wet, but I'm excited to be back in Ames. I graduated from Iowa State University in 2010 and worked in Missouri for several years as a reporter before I moved to the Register. And I was a reporter there for 7 years before taking this promotion. I've covered community news my entire career and firmly believe in local news and the power it has to inform the community, not only about issues that they face as taxpayers and as residents, but also to get to know their neighbors through storytelling and other information. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Michael Buchea.
Yeah, well, at the Greenlee School, we just focus on one thing, and Kim and Kate, they can verify this, is that we teach accuracy, 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 and fact-based ethical reporting without editorializing, and that's the reporter expressing his, her, or their personal opinion. The biggest challenge that I have training the next generation of journalists is that too many of them are on social media. I mean, statistics show that the Americans in general, but also college students, can spend up to 11 hours per day looking at a screen. You know, Kim and I were talking about this. This has been my hobby horse since 2004. I've been writing about how the internet was going to undermine journalism. And now that it has, I don't have much good news to tell you. My students tend not to read. So the whole course, you know, when you were taking classes, it was mostly a lecture and people listened, and now our attention span is so brief that I have to use videos rather than readings to get across my points. I do feel that there is hope for journalism and local journalism. I don't know why, for instance, the Des Moines Register in the Ames Tribune doesn't take stories from the Iowa Capital Dispatch as much as they should. It's a nonprofit state's newsroom bureau. I write for them in addition to being a professor. I write without pay. I think the future is not in printed newspapers. I think it's in nonprofit newspapers that have a local affiliate. Wouldn't be bad to give Kim some competition and the radio stations and the Iowa State Daily some competition, having an Ames Bureau of the Iowa Capital Dispatch.
Thank you. Ann Kinsel?
Yeah, good evening. League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County taking on this topic so vital to the survival of American democracy. I'm Ann Kinsel. I'm the Vice Chair of KHOI Community Radio, FM 89.1, covering Story and Boone counties and parts of Webster, Hamilton, Hardin, Polk, and Greene. The role we currently play in sharing news is somewhat limited, but we hope it will increase, and we think we're poised for some growth. Our primary vehicles for sharing news are two shows: Local Talk, broadcast daily from 7 to 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. on weekdays, and Capital Week on Mondays from 7 to 8 p.m., featuring newsman Dennis Hart and renowned Bleeding Heartland blogger Laura Bellin. Lynn Carey is our producer at Local Talk, as well as our board chair, and our station manager, Mike Murphy, helps us with the show, and we are an all-volunteer force. And I think that's important to recognize. At KHOI, we really share what's going on in Ames, but we don't, at this point, have the capacity to produce news that challenges people and keeps us going at the local community level.
Thank you. Susan Quesada?
Hi, I just want to say, one, it's great to see so many people here who are interested in this topic. I'm trained as a journalist. I worked at the Columbia Missourian, the Fort Dodge Messenger, and the Dubuque Telegraph Herald before joining local government. Making the switch over from one side of the aisle to the other was difficult. So I've worked this gig both ways, and I've seen some troubling trends in getting information to the public and the state of journalism, the influence of social media, and sort of this digital movement. So I think there is hope, and it encourages me to see this topic being discussed, and I hope we can make some progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate Keeley?
Hi, everyone. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Iowa State Daily, as was said. I started reporting when I was 15 years old, and I say that not because that experience was anything like the work I do now, but because my passion goes back that long. But that being said, I'm still in no means an expert. I'm still a student learning and learning from the professionals sitting among me right now. So I'm excited to share my experience, but also learn some myself. But still considering that, even though we aren't an expert, I still remind my staff we need to have the same standards as the publications outside of student journalism. So we're hoping to continue to provide that to students at Iowa State, regardless of the financial challenge the Daily has seen over the last few years. So I'm very excited to be here and excited for your questions.
Thank you. Mel Crippen.
Good evening. Again, thanks to the League of Women Voters. I firmly believe in their cause for many, many years. I've been privileged to have them on my program. I am the program director at 1430 KASI. I am not a journalist. I did not graduate with a journalism degree. I was in political science and a former discipline of the university, which was called telecommunicative arts. I've been a broadcaster for going on 50 years now, 30 at KASI. Previously, I was a sports producer with ESPN and Fox Sports and about 12 other syndicators, and traveled around doing college sports for 35 years before I retired. That's the only place I retired, by the way, so far. I say that's the most asked question of me now is, when you going to retire? When you going to retire? Actually, my plans are not to. I enjoy what I do. I love what I do. Serving this community is my heartbeat. I just, as I say, I've been here for 50 years. I've been at the radio station, which call letters began as Keep Ames Sufficiently Informed. And I'd like to think that we try to keep to that as much as we can, but obviously through staff cuts and changes in formatting, we're not as, let me put it, I mean, let's be honest, as good as I wish we were years ago. I think we did a better job years ago, but I will assure you we are trying to keep up to that quality. But much as Kate had mentioned, it gets difficult sometimes with cuts, money cuts, et cetera, but we'll save that and we'll talk more about that there. I have a connection. I have lots of connections. What time is it? Oh, John's giving me the shut up. Hard for a radio guy to do. It talks for 3 hours, right? I shall. Let's get on with it.
Thank you. Thank you. The members of our committee spent several weeks coming up with questions that we thought would cover a range of things. We wanted to start with our questions, and then we have those cards available. You're welcome to write questions. Either if you have some now, someone will come around and pick them up, or during the discussion, you can hand some in at that time. If you come up with a question in the middle, that's fine. And so we'll start with the league's questions. The first question is, what do you see as the main goal of your organization in terms of reporting the local news? We'll start with Kim.
Like I said in my intro, I think, the main goal of local news is to reflect the community, expand their understanding of key issues that affect them, whether that's as a taxpayer or a resident or as a neighbor. I think highlighting interesting people in the community so you can get to know your community better is a key issue for us. We really want to be essential to people's lives, and so that means we try to find information that answers key questions for them, to give themselves more power over their lives, more power over their elected officials, and helps keep elected officials to account. One of the other ways we hope to be essential to people's lives is giving them multiple ways to interact with our news. So while we do have a 6-day-a-week print product, we also have a website and social media in all of its forms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we hope by offering our news on those types of platforms, we can reach readers where they want to be reading news. We know that a lot of younger readers don't pick up a newspaper anymore, right? So if we can reach them on Instagram where they are spending some of their time, then we're hoping that we're being able to deliver things that are valid and relevant to their lives.
Thank you. I'm going to mix up the order because if you're the last person, oftentimes somebody has already said it and you don't get a chance to say anything. So I'm going to mix it up a little. Mel Crippen, the question was, what do you see as the main goal of your organization in terms of reporting the local news?
The goal that we have is to inform our listeners quickly, but more importantly, factually, to make sure that our stories have substance, that have background. There are a lot of times that things leak into my ear. I have those secret sources out there, but until we can verify that what we are reporting to the public is factual, we won't do it. Sometimes we've held back on stories because we could not get them substantiated in the way we felt we should, to make sure that you understand. I'll give you an example, a quick example here, was the recent swimming pool fiasco for Ames High School. And there were all kinds of rumors out there, you know, alligators loose in it, all kinds of things. And I was informed earlier by a secret source that it was strictly paperwork. It was paperwork. They couldn't open it up till they had the right forms filled out for the state to okay it safe enough to be used. And I was told that. Someone came up to me and says, "Hey Mel, what's going on with the swimming pool?" I said, "I know, but I can't tell you." I should have just said, "I don't know." I mean, but you kind of know, and it's protecting those sources. My wife was a, geez, John, I think your watch is fast, was a police sergeant with the city of Ames for over 20 years before she retired. And that's a bad position for a guy that's in radio. And she would come, "You can't imagine what happened tonight," and you can't say anything about it, you know. One of those. That's just basically substantiating the news that we bring you, make sure it's factual.
Thank you. Susan Quesada, the question was, what do you see as the main goal of your organization in terms of reporting the local news?
So as the representative here of your local government, we're not a news organization, obviously, but we are a source of information, and it's important information. As citizens of Ames, we want you all to be informed. We want you to know where your money is going. We want you to know what services are offered and the programs that we provide. In fact, one of the key factors in running a effective government is transparency. And so what we do is push out information. And while we do primarily push it out, we also then do receive input as well. So what I try to do, and what I've been doing now for almost 20 years here at the City of Ames, is to be where people are. And if people are on digital media, that's where the City of Ames is. And if they're on the radio, we're on the radio. And if they're in the newspaper, we're there as well. What is getting increasingly difficult is to get that real estate in an incredibly competitive world. And so, and the other thing that journalism does is, and as I know as a journalist, is interpretation and analysis. And I can't do that. So what I can do is tell you when the city council meeting is, and I can tell you what's on the agenda, but I can't interpret it for you. I can try. I can try to tell you how it might impact your life. You might have a different take on that, and that exchange of information, that's really important. And we need to work together to improve our local government and really to improve our quality of life.
Thank you. Kate Keeley, the question was, what do you see as the main goal of your organization in terms of reporting the local news?
Definitely. So obviously the overarching goal here is to supply our audience with information so they can make informed decisions about their life. But the Daily has an interesting angle on this in that we serve the Ames community as well as the student population. And the student population it's crucial to bring them local news because I often hear from my peers, well, this doesn't affect me, I don't really care about this, it seems boring when I could, you know, be watching CNN or Fox News, which is a little more entertaining. But we really do our best to take the content that we get from city council meetings and try to tie it back to them, because it does tie back to them at the end of the day, even if they're only going to be here for 4 years or so. But we also, our other side of it is we want to get out more into the Ames community as well. I feel like over the last, at least as long as I've worked at the Daily for the last 4 years, we have kept that student-centric approach, and we would like to cover more of the city of Ames and more of Ames residential issues. So it's kind of something we're trying to progress on more.
Thank you. Ann Kinsel, the question was, what do you see as the main goal of your organization in terms of reporting the local news?
Well, at KHOI's Local Talk, we really share information about what's going on in our listening area with an emphasis on local nonprofits and government agencies. In fact, we work closely with Susan to put out a lot of information about the city of Ames. You know, sharing information is important. We don't create news at KHOI. We don't report news so much. We basically take local stuff and kind of we're like a broadcast community calendar in a way. We have ambitions to be more than that, but funding has precluded us from doing that so far. You know, what's our strength is that we don't have any corporate overlords telling us, well, this isn't newsworthy or that is. We make decisions as a community organization made up of volunteers, free of really influence from others. But our weakness is that we don't have the funding to take on greater responsibilities that might be useful for our listening area.
Thank you. And Michael Buccia, what do you see as the main goal of your organization in terms of reporting the local news?
The main goal is to train the next generation of journalists and to instill in them our long-standing values. Accuracy, I mentioned that already. Accuracy is the most important thing that we can teach them. But above and beyond that, our goal and the goal of all of these news organizations is just one thing, and that is to inform the public so they can make intelligent decisions in the voting booth. That's it. That's what journalism does. It doesn't do anything else. It entertains at times and things of that nature. But the reason why we have the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights is that we're a republic. So a republic elects its representatives. In order to elect representatives, the public has to be informed. In addition to that, has to be educated. An uninformed, educated populace cannot elect the right people to represent them. And an uneducated populace cannot do the same thing either. You need both. John Jay, the first Supreme Court Justice, said that if we're going to have a republic, we have to give education at a cheap and easy rate. So the goal here is very simple: make good choices in the voting booth. Nothing else matters.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the second question that we have is, what is the biggest challenge you face in bringing news to the public? We're going to start with Mel Crippen.
Part of our challenge now, and it's been referred to much like KHOI, is funding. Even though we are a corporate entity, we are an iHeart, one of the largest broadcast organizations in the world. I will tell you this much about iHeart. When we first were picked up by them, I was reluctant. I was afraid of what was going to happen on a local basis. And when they came in and make sure I was going to sign on to further work for them, one of the things that they assured me is, we're not going to touch you. We have regulations, et cetera, but as far as your local coverage and how you deal with local radio, we want you to continue in the manner that you are. And so far, other than cutting back our staff tremendously, they have held their word And that was one of the things I made them promise was, if you steer away from what we do now in serving our community and being a part of this community, we are, and we recognize it, we're small-town radio, but we're not small-town news. We are important to everyone, every one of the listeners that I have out there, both of them. We know how important it is, and we're very selective in the news, but we went from a staff of 18 when I first got to KASI. There's now 3 of us. And the news director and sports director are one and the same.
Thank you. Kate Keeley, what is the biggest challenge you face in bringing news to the public?
So social media will be talked about a lot, so I'll kind of try to make that one brief. But obviously, our age cohort we serve thrives off social media. TikTok especially, I'll see students present TikToks to me and assume that's journalism. And I have to make the distinction that that's media, what we do is journalism. And a lot of times we find too is, the media is taking work from journalists and then repurposing that and kind of making their own financial gain off that. So I think that's a huge issue, not only just for the Daily, but journalism as a whole. But then specifically for the Iowa State Daily, we are definitely feeling the trickle-down effects of losing financial funding from the state. So we also receive money from student government, kind of like a subscription fee for students, so then they can access our website for free of charge. And we've definitely over the last few years had during the allocation process like reassessments of the amount of money we receive. We've cut back, we no longer do print publication because we can't afford to. And I find now because cost of living has gotten so expensive and tuition has gone up for students are already working 2 jobs. They're not going to be able to spend 20 hours a week for free writing articles when they already have homework and another job to get to. So our staff has shrunk down for that reason too. Students just can't allot the time for something they aren't going to be able to receive compensation on. And I know when I tell like my parents that, they're like, well, I never was paid for my internships. And I just kind of have to remind them it's a very different time for students in terms of financially.
Thank you. Ann Kinsel?
Well, our challenge is, of course, funding. We never had it, so we don't know what it's really like to have lost it. As a small community radio station that just celebrated its 10th anniversary. But we have another significant challenge, and that is finding volunteers. As a volunteer-driven organization, to ask people to take on reporting responsibilities, we have to be able to train them so that they engage in accuracy and proper etiquette on the air and all these things. And so we have to be able to fund that. And it's just very, very difficult. I mean, we're talking about convincing people to spend their hard-earned money on yet another thing. It's not like they don't have competing interests for that. And so as a small community radio station, how do we even start getting into that game? We don't have a marketing staff. We basically have a station manager and 2 other employees. So we're very limited, but we do the best we can.
Thank you. Michael Buchea?
Well, the biggest obstacle we face in journalism education is the demonization of journalism by politicians, coupled with high tuition and low salaries for our graduates. It's taking a big toll. And, when a child says, I have zeal, I want to be a journalist, basically the parents try to talk them out of it. And this does not bode well for anyone. The other issue that we have is that our students need places to work, and local newspapers everywhere, but particularly in Iowa, are just drying up. They're going under because people refuse to pay for subscriptions. Now I'm going to ask you all a question. How many of you pay for newspaper subscriptions? Raise your hands. That's why you're here. And the ones that aren't are out there. Okay, so we've got to get out the word that news isn't free. It doesn't come easily. It's not, the stuff you get on social media is not journalism. Good journalism is done every day in major newspapers and local newspapers across the country. But if no one gets it and reads it, it's not having an impact.
Thank you. Susan Quesada?
So the biggest challenge of bringing news to the public, I guess I would mirror a lot of the other comments that have already been said. I have a very small staff, so our time is limited. We have a lot of information to get out. I start a lot of meetings where I'm talking with the public by asking these questions. How do you get your information? Do you subscribe to a newspaper? Do you listen to a radio station? And it's amazing to me, I can go through an entire list, and some people will never raise their hand. They don't do any of those things. And so we have some disenfranchisement within our own public. How do we reach people who are not reaching out to us? And then how do we make good decisions in the absence of feedback? And so all these things are kind of cyclical. We make decisions in the dark. Often the times we hear from people when we make the wrong decision. It would be a lot easier to have you on board at the beginning. So, and we make a lot of decisions. I can think of several that we've made recently. Where do we site the new indoor aquatic center? Lots of, concerns about that one. What should we name the new airport? We are trying to reach out and find different ways to gather that information. Honestly, I'm trying to fill a hole that local journalism used to cover for me. So it's interesting. I have when you hand your story over to local journalism, you lose ownership of it, but that's okay if you trust who's taking the story and running with it. Now we have a situation where the city is trying to basically do everything. We are the generator of the news, the disseminator of the news, the collector of the feedback, and then the decision makers. And that is not how the system was supposed to run. So it's a whole new ballgame out there. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Kim Norvell?
It might sound like a broken record here, but we don't have money. Fewer reporters means that we have to make decisions on what we can and can't cover. Susan is great at sending us press releases, but unfortunately we cannot cover every single thing that comes our way. We have to make decisions on what does and doesn't get into the paper. We used to have dozens of reporters. Today we have 3. We have 3 news reporters, 1 photographer, and 1 sports reporter. We also face down a changing news landscape. People are not subscribing to the print product. We keep legacy subscribers, but we're not gaining new ones. Instead, they are subscribing to our website, which often is a lot cheaper, but that means that's less revenue for us to work with for hiring journalists, for training journalists, for keeping journalists on staff, because we want to be able to, advance their careers in terms of salaries and other issues like that. It's been a difficult community conversation to start to get people to pay for news online when it has been offered for free for decades. It's hard for them to grasp the concept that they would need to pay for this product when they've been getting it for free before. And so it's hard for us to kind of educate the public on why we think our work is valuable and why we think you should be paying for the time that we're putting in to informing the public. And I would say just too, people generally, are less likely to feel that being informed by a non-biased source like the Register or the Ames Tribune or these radio stations or the Iowa State Daily is essential to them. They don't think that that's an essential part of their lives anymore.
Thank you. Question number 3. Many people feel they have lost local information such as calendar of events, letters to the editor, and opportunities to submit stories, which may result in a loss of public interest. Can and will your organization help bring these opportunities back? We'll start with Kate Keeley.
Yes, that is my first answer. We do currently accept letters to the editor, stories, and we just recently are updating our website, so we are hoping to create a community calendar here within the next semester. But the other half of that is we clearly need to do better engagement and outreach to the community so they understand that they can come to us when they do have a grievance. We are a public forum for them to utilize when they do have issues or disagree with a decision of a legislator So yes, they're extremely crucial, but I think we need to, at least as the Iowa State Daily, is improve how we promote these kind of different modems for people.
Thank you. Ann Kinsel, would you
There's
like me to reread it?
Yeah, there's something interesting in your question where it says that many people have lost, feel they've lost local news information. I wonder if that's really true. If people really felt that they had lost something, they might want to seek it. We live in a time where everybody's an expert, right? You Google it and you know how to do it. You are it. So who needs journalism anymore? Who needs, I just pick something up and I'm an expert. I know what it is. So I think that's really a struggle there. But at KHOI, we are a community calendar in a way. We're a broadcast community calendar. That's what we do. We let local organizations, we reach out to them, they come to us, and we share kind of a talking calendar 5 days a week. Is that enough? No. As Michael said, we need this for democracy. Is having a talking calendar enough to save or help our democracy? Heck no. And as we said earlier, with funding, we could do more. We could do more than just be a community calendar.
Thank you. Mel Crippen?
It's changed. It's changed tremendously, and we at 1430 KASI offer a type of community calendar. We call it the Breakfast Club on Friday mornings, where we have different agencies, nonprofit groups come in, promote their causes or whatever they are endeavoring to get people to. We offer that every Friday. We're at a remote location. Gee, I sound like a commercial. The other thing is one of the things I miss that we no longer do was we used to have 1 hour each morning that we opened up the program. We would bring in guests and subject them to questions from callers to come in. We don't do that anymore. Our programming now is, we're local from 6 to 9 is basically what it is. Then it's syndicated programming from there on out. I don't agree with that. I just don't. Syndicated programming gives me the chills. Let me give you an example of something we don't do anymore, which my news director at that time and I argued over. We used to do obituaries. They aren't fun. They aren't, and for me at my age, it's shocking because I'm like hearing where friends are leaving, so to speak. But all of a sudden, my news director argued, said, "Oh, we don't do that. It's so small town or something." I said, "No, that is what our people want to know. There are people out there that want to know what's happening." And it was funny, and they were sponsored. We had a sponsor for them, which I will assure you was one of the reasons they continued as long as they did. But once the sponsor dropped, we dropped the obituaries. And I tell you, the proof in the pudding for me was the phone started ringing off the hook each morning. Do you know anything about so-and-so? Did so-and-so die? We heard so-and-so died. And I said, there's the proof. Doesn't need to be sponsored. Our listeners want to hear this. This is information that they want, and we should have continued it.
Thank you. The question is, many people feel they have lost local news information such as calendar of events, letters to the editor, and opportunities to submit stories, which may result in a loss of public interest. Can and will your organization help bring these opportunities back? Kim Norville.
I would say that's not likely. We have studied the readership on these types of items, and unfortunately, few people read or interact with them, at least digitally. It takes a lot of time and effort to gather this information and to present it to the public, and given our low staffing levels and our priorities on reporting top-notch journalism, things like these just kind of have to fall to the wayside. Bringing high effort, low interest pieces is not our top priority, but serving our readers with high quality journalism is.
Thank you. Susan Quesada.
So we only will promote our own City of Ames programs, services, and events. And I do get called periodically throughout the month about other organizations asking to use our resources, and we just don't have the ability to do that. In the past, I was able to say, you know, have you contacted the newspaper or another organization? And I don't have that option anymore. There really isn't anybody doing this service any longer, but I will say that I don't get those calls as much as I used to, and so I don't know if that interest has gone away or if people are just finding other ways to get their materials. We continue to push our information out, so you will find a calendar of events on our website that lists City of Ames events, but we don't serve as a community gathering. We don't aggregate information throughout the community, so I don't see that coming back. And I don't know what that means.
Thank you. Michael Buchea.
You know, I think the question is written by a legacy reader my age or around our age. This question is not pertinent anymore. That's gone. It's finished. It's over. Get over it. It's gone. They can't afford to do it, and while many people feel they have lost this, many, many more don't care. All right? And you have to accept that many, many more don't care because they're inundated by so much information from so many sources on their cell phone, on their TVs. All the digital apparatus that you have is constantly breaking your concentration and notifying you of you should be doing something else. Right? That's what the cell phone does. It tells us as soon as you're bored, there's something else to do, there's a notification. Okay, what the Greenlee School does, and what I do particularly, is to teach students how to write. Writing and reporting and content creation is the most important thing that we all should be able to do. The best stories that I've seen on the web that are local come from people who are not affiliated with any news organization. They just know how to blog, they have a website, they have a viewership, and they report many things that our working reporters miss. In fact, the cell phone is the new broadcast. Now take a look at Darnell Frazier, right? You know, she won a Pulitzer Prize with filming George videotaping with her phone the murder of George Floyd. There was no journalist there. Many of the news comes from people with a cell phone. So what we need to do in education is forget about journalism as a profession and teach it as general education. If everybody's a journalist, then we ought to teach journalism as general education. In the university, we have general requirements that people generally do not want to take. So let's make journalism part of everyone's experience so that they can take hold of the Constitution and inform local audiences.
Thank you. Question number 4. What do you feel is the solution to covering and getting investigative local news to the public, or news in general? We'll start with Kate Keeley.
Yeah, it was already mentioned earlier, but I do think nonprofit journalism is the future. I interned at the Carroll Times-Herald and then the Iowa Capital Dispatch this last summer, and I saw such a drastic difference between what the Carroll Times-Herald had to go through. We were always stressed about getting advertisers and kind of had that lingering threat of, oh, if we publish this, there could be potential backlash. So, and that was totally alleviated at the Iowa Capital Dispatch. The Cap Dispatch is still definitely like a smaller staff, but we were able to do much more without that financial restraint. So, I stress this all the time, either low profit journalism or nonprofit is, I could see is the way to go.
Thank you. Mel Crippen.
I'm still thinking. It hurts. We need, speaking on ours, we need, as we say, everything's nonprofit, and there's so much commercialism, and it has really affected on-air product. And let me give you a different kind of an example. a certain automobile has something wrong with it. And I speak of this back from when I worked at Channel 5 many, many years ago. You all remember Channel 5, when the university owned it? There were stories that never made the air for fear that one of the advertisers would take offense. It needed to hit the air. It was something that would have benefited many of our public viewers, but they killed it. We can't lose the revenue. We can't afford to lose the revenue. So it never made the air. The other thing that would help us with local news, I think Michael hit it when he said, everybody's a reporter anymore. Everybody out there. If you've got a phone, you're a reporter. The only difficulty is how it's reported and how, you know, when they shot Mr. Floyd, that tragedy, you get it from one angle. And it doesn't always tell the story as true as it should be. I'm not saying in that particular case that it wasn't, but as amateurs, we just don't quite get everything from the angle that we all need to see it to get an objective viewpoint. Sometimes those are very, very slanted.
Thank you. Michael Buchea?
You know, I don't think that there's any way to get more local news in any community. I'm not going to be an optimist for you. I've been writing about this for 20 years and being booed off stages when I told people what was going to happen because they didn't want to believe it. But what we have now is a situation of news deserts that has really impacted our society. Up until the 2016 election, local communities did not necessarily do party line votes. In other words, you could have a Republican senator or a Democratic governor and things like that. But as the local newspapers evaporated, what we have are the main national newspapers. They're good reporters, Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, maybe the Dallas Morning News, Chicago Tribune. They're good people. But every issue now is national. And that has led to a sectarian society in which we hate the opposing party more than we love our own. And the whole idea of local is gone, and it has impacted our democracy. How do you bring it back? Well, I don't know. I think nonprofit newspapers, nonprofit digital, all that hasn't worked. I guess I can do this real quickly. Look, this is not news. Even when, we'll take Kim Norvell's graduation year, 2012, that's even before. The Knight Foundation said, local, local, local. We tried local, local, local. Nobody bought the newspaper. Then they said, well, let's take a hospital approach, to teaching, journalism as a teaching hospital. Nobody bought that idea. All these things about making news local have been tried with millions upon millions of dollars invested in trying to resurrect this, and it has failed. All of it's failed. And so what do we have left? I think what we have left is the League of Women Voters. I think we have organizations that have to remind us repeatedly about the importance of democracy in a democratic republic. And I don't know if at this point we can lose the sectarian society that we now have. I don't know who can do it. We need leadership in Washington, certainly. But I don't have any answers for this. I think it's a dead question.
Thank you. Susan Quesada?
How do we get more local news to the public? Well, from the days when I was a journalist to my days today, I keep a message in my brain whenever I write anything, and it's, why do I care? Why do I care? Why am I writing what I'm writing? Why am I pushing this information out? Why should anybody be concerned about it? So I think you need to have relevance. So, because again, we're pushing out messaging to people. I need to remember their time is valuable, and they need to care about what I am giving them. And we'll talk about social media and radio and television and all those changes. Those are just tools. Those are just the ways we disseminate the message. I talk about those as breadcrumbs. I'm splashing information on social media. I am sending press releases out. I'm putting information in newsletters. We have the luxury of, we had a cable television station. Now we pretty much broadcast onto YouTube through Ames Television. I have a lot of tools, and I'm lucky in that sense because I'm kind of pushing it out everywhere. I mean, just as an example, I bet people at this table, I send out about 200 press releases a year. So almost every day, people are getting information from me about what's happening at the City of Ames. And when they get that information in that first paragraph, they better understand why they should care. And now the people at this table, they figure out if they have the space or the time to push that information out. But if they don't, I'm using the resources I have. And it's a scramble. It's an every day as you're moving and pushing it out. And what I'm hoping is that I'm going to hit one of those sweet spots that one of you are going to pick up and read, and you're going to see that this is important, that this program affects me, that this service affects me, that my street is closed, that my water pressure might be bad today, that my electricity is off. And these are the kinds of things that you need to have a decent quality of life. Now, even bigger picture issues like who you vote for, where you vote, when you vote, I'm trying to do those too. You know, it just builds on itself. But I guess it comes back to, for me, the solution to getting more local news to the public is I'm looking for relevance and how it's important to all of you.
Thank you. Kim Norville?
Every community needs a Susan. So I'd say, you know, we're working on the solution every day, right? We're trying really hard to bring as much local news to the public as we possibly can with the resources that we have. I think it goes back to, again, some of the answers that I gave before, but creating news that is, or bringing news that is essential to people's lives so that they feel like what they're reading helps them make valuable decisions to live their lives. And in turn, we hope that means that they will pay for that. You know, I'd say subscribing is the biggest way that public can support the news, but we're also trying to meet people where they're at. So bringing the news in different platforms versus just traditional print or digital products. I mentioned this earlier, we're trying different ways to bring the news to a younger generation who is probably on their phone, not reading a print product, is maybe on Instagram or TikTok, which we haven't really delved into yet, but I know that we should because we know that the readers are there, right? Our potential subscribers and readers are there. So it's trying to figure out how to create a local news product that we're used to seeing in newsprint that can be very long into the shortest, you know, possible video that you can create. So it's a very challenging situation. Another thing that we're really trying to do at the Register and at the Tribune is to try to reach different people than what we have now. You know, our subscriber base is very homogenous. We want to be relevant and valuable to people of color, to younger people, to families. And so we're trying to find stories that are of interest to all of our citizens and not just our subscribers.
Thank you. Ann Kinsel?
So I'm probably the only non-journalism related person at this table, so I'm going to take that question and look at it from a different perspective. First of all, let's disabuse ourselves of one thing. Nonprofit journalism doesn't mean journalism that doesn't have costs. Reporters still have to be paid. Editors still have to be employed. So let's just put that aside. But everybody has been answering this question from the standpoint of what should the news media or journalism do? Maybe the question is a little bit different. What should the rest of us do? What kind of a society are we that we put people under such constraints of time and effort, still working 40 hours a week in a world where many other places are working much less than that, where if we had women who had child care at home, maybe they would have a little more time to take care of their democracy and read local news. So maybe the question isn't so much what the news media needs to do to capture us, but what do we need to do as a society to have enough leisure and time to be able to consume things that help us improve not only our lives, but our country as a whole? So I would turn that question on its head.
Okay, thank you. If you have a question and that you'd like to submit, would you raise your hand and so that, would someone come around and pick up the questions that are still out here? We have a question sorter, and what they're doing is they're putting together questions that are alike or trying to sort them into piles so that we know what we're going to do with them. We're going to give questions from the audience now, or from the audience that have been written. And I'll do the same thing. I'll try to mix it up so we're not having the same person answer right away. Panelists, if you find that the answer that you want to give has already been given, or if you want to pass, that's okay. Because these are ones that they, of course, haven't heard before, and it may not apply to them, as we've heard some of the people say. Please. Okay. This one is directed to Kim. Why should I take both the Des Moines Register and the Ames Tribune when they print the same things?
That is a good question. I'm not going to tell you to take one or the other, but I think, the Ames Tribune, I'm hoping my goal as the new editor of the Ames Tribune will bring you more local content. I do understand that the Des Moines Register content is in the Ames Tribune paper. What we're trying to set up here as a company now is treating Ames as a bureau to the Des Moines Register and treating Des Moines as a bureau to Ames. So what I mean by that is Des Moines now thinks of Ames as part of its coverage area because we are connected together in the same company. And Ames now sees Des Moines as part of its coverage area, though Ames is the priority for our local community. So we're able to bring you content that has a statewide focus in the Ames Tribune from the Des Moines Register, which we are unable to do with our short staff, right? So that's extremely important now when we're coming up to the November election, where the Des Moines Register can bring you content via the Ames Tribune on the governor's race, on statewide races, Secretary of State race, that sort of thing. And the reporters in Des Moines now are thinking more about how they can include Ames as part of that coverage. So I really see it as a benefit, actually. I think it's better personally to get the statewide news into the Ames Tribune than it is to get AP Wire, which could be from anywhere in the world or the nation. But hopefully, that means that we're also getting Ames news into the Des Moines Register. And that has happened in, the 4 to 5 weeks that I've been here. We've been getting that really exciting information that's happening in Ames into Des Moines. And we know that people, Ankeny, Ames' closest suburb is, people are commuting back and forth. So I think there's value to having both of those communities covered.
Thank you. Are there more questions? Thank you. Okay, the second question, and this doesn't have a specific person, so I'll ask each of the panelists. Why must I receive my Sunday Ames paper by mail at about 3 or 4 p.m. on Monday, or if that's a holiday on Tuesday? That's not news anymore, it's history. I guess that's to the Ames Tribune person.
Yeah, so those decisions are above my level, but unfortunately, we did have some cuts in Ames recently, and that was our circulation management, so we no longer have local delivery, and we rely on the mail service. I don't know the logistics of that, but I assume we don't have delivery on Sundays early because that's how the U.S. mail works.
Okay, thank you. This is for Kim also.
Lucky Kim.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, so, Kim.
Does somebody else want to respond? Okay, that's fine.
So that raises an interesting question. In this day and age, given what you've said, why is it we still have such a focus on a paper newspaper? Is there something else that we could be doing that would push out news to our localities that would work better?
I mean, I would say we don't just focus on our newspaper. We have a robust website and social media presence.
But, you know, how does the public really know? I mean, why continue with the newspaper, I guess is the question
That
I
is a
would
very
ask.
good question. It costs a lot to print a newspaper.
Yeah, I have recommended that all print newspapers cease printing and put the money into reporting. Printing newspapers is just not going to get the next generation to actually read it. All print publications should cease, and that money should not go to the publisher. It should go in hiring more reporters for more local coverage.
Anyone else in the panel?
Well, just from a sustainability point of view as well, a print product is just not sustainable.
I would also add too that the switching to the digital era, I guess, has put more pressure on reporters. Everyone, it's now the standard to get a story out, you know, in under an hour. So while your paper may take a couple days to get to you, I can guarantee you it was on the website right after the event happened.
Anyone else?
All I can say, I'm probably representative of my age. I sure miss my Sunday papers and holding them
It's
and
fair.
reading them
It's very fair.
and taking my time going through. I realize what the age is now. We even at KASI have websites and we put our news on all day long. I mean, whereas we deliver the morning news, et cetera, all day long. If something fresh comes up or something, you can find it on the website. So, but give me a good old newspaper any day. It's hard to start your grill with your computer.
Okay, the next question. How did you and your organization address the growing distrust in mainstream media? And then there's a second part. Can equal news outlets impact the growth of QAnon, which threw off, let's see, I can't read that, I'm sorry. Just do the first part and I'll look at the second a little bit more. How do you address the growing mistrust in mainstream media?
How do we address what?
How do we
How do you,
address the
how
growing
does your
distrust?
organization address the mistrust in mainstream media?
There's nothing we can do about it. The politicians love it. They're not like you. They want to see journalism denigrated. They get away with things. They don't allow reporters in to cover certain things. There's no accountability. People just express whatever untruth they want to say. Truth father. I just got done with a lecture today on falsehood, telling students that falsehood travels faster and quicker through more echelons of society than the truth does. So yeah, I mean, this is not going to change unless you ask. Here's an interesting question for all of you to ask when someone's running. Do you support journalism? Ask your politician that. Ask Governor Reynolds. Do you support journalism? You know, ask Senator Grassley. Ask Franken. Do you support journalism? I wonder if they ever got that question recently. But to me, it's part of the sectarian society now. Eliminate journalism, and people get away with things. So ask that question. That's an interesting question. Do you support journalism? You'll get my vote if you do. Doesn't matter what party you belong to, right? That's an interesting question. But no, I mean, this is a situation that we all worried about. We were all worried about this. We've been worried about this for years. This is not new, but it has occurred. And the only way to change it is through votes. But if people aren't informed and believe what the party says or their leader says or a conspiracy says, then these types of questions will lack merit. So yeah, let's ask every politician running, do you support journalism? And if you do, you have my vote.
I would say too, you know, news travels fast. So when
Yeah.
falsehoods get out there, it's hard to counteract that narrative with the truth, right? And in journalism, we work really hard to bring accurate news, and that can sometimes take time, right? We have to verify things with legitimate, trusted sources. And so while those falsehoods are building up and building up and building up, while we're trying to bring the truth, you can often miss then that audience because they've moved on to the next thing, right? So, it just, accuracy is, Michael, I'm gonna say Bougea because that's what we always called him at school, but
So you can call him whatever you
last name
want.
only. He opened his statement with accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. I think that's how we kind of get over this mistrust, is that we let people fully understand or show people that we're bringing you true, accurate news.
Is there anyone else?
When we decided that corporations were citizens, we empowered a big citizen to use that power to spread a lot of disinformation for their own gain. And if we want to change that, we better think about who's a citizen. Okay, is a corporation a citizen, really? And if so, how is that influencing our news?
Let me take a little pressure off politicians and say something in society that you all need to be aware of. You are living in a society of algorithm. In other words, everything that you do, all the social media, all the purchases on Amazon Prime, everything is an algorithm. Technology does two things and two things only. It surveils you and it sells to you, and mostly does that at the same time. So in this type of society, people don't need to know why anymore. To make a sale, you need to know who, how, when, where, and what, but you're living in a world without why. Journalists used to supply the why, but you don't need it anymore to sell product. In an economy that's technology-based, such as ours, and this, I've written about this in my books, is that we're living in a world without why. I don't know why the Ukraine war started. I don't know the why about any important issue anymore. Do you? And the reason is that we're living in a world of algorithm. People like Zuckerberg, people like Elon Musk, they're the real presidents and princes of our society now. And I can say this from my research, it's time to take a look at what technology has given us. We were promised a global village and we got a global mall. All right? And in order to take that back, we have to stress the one thing that has been warning us about this, and that's journalism. We've been warning about where society is going to go in technology now for 2 decades, but that's not where the money went.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. The other part of that question was, it's talking about QAnon and how the disinformation was spread, and we didn't really address that. I don't know, is there a panelist that wants to talk about QAnon and the news media and those groups that have spread what we call misinformation?
Well, I'm not so much worried about QAnon. My background's in public health. What I'm worried about is 10,000 Iowans who died needlessly due to COVID because we didn't have the right tools or the right desire to spread information about how people could stop that. So we can sit here and talk about news as an abstract concept to save our democracy, but at the end of the day, that news is about a lot more. It's about also saving people's lives. The disinformation that comes through QAnon and other sort of cults and odd approaches to thinking is not only destroying perhaps journalism, but it has the capacity to kill us, as we've seen in COVID. And that's really frightening. So we're talking about the loss of a lot more than jobs in journalism or accuracy and truth. We're talking about people's lives here. This information that journalists share keeps us healthy, keeps us well, keeps us thriving as individuals, not just as a society.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hard to top that.
I think this has partially been answered, but I'm going to read it anyway. It says that Kim Norvell said her readers value high-quality journalism. And to all of the panelists, what is high-quality journalism? I think some of you have spoken to this, but is there anyone that wants to answer them? The difference between, I suppose, just getting any information out there versus what we call high-quality journalism.
Do you want me to start? I see high-quality journalism as journalism that doesn't just skim the surface. It provides you information, like Susan mentioned, about why you should care, right? Like, how does this information impact my life? I think it provides information. It talks to multiple people. It provides information that is valuable to you. It goes beyond the lens of just, a singular topic. You're providing information that people can relate to and connect to, and it's well written. There's a lot of things that go into it.
High-quality journalism answers the question why. You just said that, and that's what it does. High-quality journalism takes time. In addition to teaching, I don't get paid for my journalism work. I do journalism to help teach my students how to work for the profession. But right now, I've been working for 3 weeks on something that your organization would be very interested in. How would the world look if Virginia Minor versus Hepperstadt in 1878, the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment granted suffrage to women? Because it does. 14th Amendment says that if you're a citizen in the United States, no state can deprive you of the rights of citizenship. How would the world have been? The Supreme Court said that suffrage was not mentioned in the Constitution, therefore, you've been the same thing as Dobbs. They did the same thing as Dobbs. But high-quality journalism takes time. I've got to fact-check it with 3 judges to make sure I got the case law right. You know how this works. This is just really difficult thing to do. I do it on my own time as a professor to teach my students. But if I'm working for you, I'm not going to have time to do this story. And so many stories go by the wayside, isn't it true?
Yeah.
Because we just don't have the time or the resources.
I would say that's not true. I mean, I think the challenge is doing that high quality journalism while also filling a daily paper and online product, right? And so you have to figure out how to balance both of them. When high quality journalism, what we call enterprise reporting, takes time, you have to make time for it. And it's something that we value as an organization.
But you have 3, you just said you had 3 people.
Exactly.
Okay, so,
So think about how
I think of high-quality journalism not only provides me with a why, but makes me want to think
right.
more about the why and continue pursuing that line of why. Why is that? That's what it does for me as a consumer of it.
So when I think about high-quality journalism, accuracy obviously is top of the list. Multi-source, I was always taught you never have a single source story, and I see a lot of single source stories going out today. It doesn't give you perspective. It doesn't give you, I think it's pretty one-dimensional if only one person talks. I would look for timeliness, and I would look for thoughtfulness. That's how I would judge the journalism.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off that, always going to the source. I feel like a lot of times you find news articles now that are just press releases flipped, or maybe someone shoots out an email real quick to get a response. Actually sitting down with people and challenging what they're saying to ensure it's fact. And then also, once the article is actually written, as a reader, you shouldn't be able to identify the reporter who wrote that. You should be able to see both sides of the stories and walk away and make your own conclusion. And I think that's a lot of issues nowadays, is we find there's always some type of hidden agenda under an article.
I think it needs to stimulate us. It may make us more inquisitive, put some of the responsibility on our shoulders to investigate the reporters if you want to find out their reliability, their reputations. But it should stimulate us. If it's a subject that really concerns you, you should never take it at face value. Whether they have 2 sources, 3 sources, take it upon yourself to do a little more investigating as much as you can.
I want to make one more point that we haven't discussed here, and that is the pressure that journalists are under with people threatening them. And particularly women journalists are threatened much more than male journalists. But even in this conversation that we're having now, I'm going to get emails, all right? And I'm going to get very sectarian types of emails. Many people here will get those emails. If you write a fact-based story in a society that wants affirmation rather than information, half of the readership is going to troll you, okay? And you know, I write really innocuous things for the Des Moines Register, like the philosophy of one less thing, and I get hate mail. The idea of that is that journalists, particularly women journalists and women journalists of color, are trolled to such extent that many actually leave the profession. And this is something that no one here has talked about, but that is a part of our lives that you need to understand. It's not only low pay, it's the trolling.
Thank you. We have about 12 minutes left, and this next one is a very short one, I think. How is the Iowa Capitol Dispatch funded? Does anyone know?
They disclose their funders on their website, don't they?
They disclose it, it's typically by grants. It's part of State's newsroom. I actually was anticipating this question. They get grants, and the network employs and supports editors and reporters to cover local communities. I have made the recommendation to League of Women Voters. I call up Kathy Obradovich and say, we need an Ames Bureau for the Iowa Capitol Dispatch. And I think that what would be great is if people at the Daily could help do this, affiliated with the Daily, affiliated with students who could use that as internships. I mean, there's so many opportunities that we're not looking at with nonprofit journalism.
The next question is for Michael Buchea. Please give us some perspective on the power and reach of Lester Murdoch.
The power and reach of what?
Lester Murdoch. I remember the concern many felt when we learned about his purchase of USA Today. What is his impact on government democracy, both here and in the UK?
What was the publisher?
Murdoch. Lester Murdoch is what.
Oh, really? Okay. Look, you can make this argument about any. I consider, and this is going to offend some of you, I consider CNN and MSNBC as problematic to accuracy as Fox News. And that's going to surprise you because you want affirmation from MSNBC, you want affirmation from CNN. To me, that's not news. They're aggregate now. They employ people who do the news at the New York Times, like Maggie Haberman. And there's ethical issues with Maggie Haberman giving her editorializing on CNN. But CNN is basically an aggregate organization now. In other words, they bring in reporters who have done the work at these major newspapers, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, NPR, and these are real good, wonderful journalists, the best in the world, better than my generation ever produced. And they bring them in and they ask them about their stories. That's, the last time I looked, the Huffington Post didn't have a bureau in Ukraine, The idea that we get all of our news from non-journalism sources concerns me. I think that we have to just stop the cable, stop the affirmation, and start reaching across the aisle. This is really, really dangerous. We're in a dangerous situation now as a democratic republic. If we allow sectarian society to continue, in which you hate the other side more than you love your own, this country is in for some terrible times. And some of these cable news organizations are making millions of dollars off of our need for affirmation. Okay, so I like what you said. It's up to them. It's up to you to reach across the aisle. I have wonderful, incidentally, I don't have a political party. I'm a rhino. Okay, I'm a fiscal conservative and social liberal. I've been a Republican for years, but I'm not a Trump Republican, and people call me a rhino. You thought I was a journalist, so I must be a Democrat, right? So you see what the news has done to you? In my office, I have, this is my son, in my office, I have a picture of a president. That president is George W. Bush, okay? The idea that a journalist has to be, that speaks the way we do, has to be a Democrat has been put in your brain somehow. So let's reach across the aisle. I have people who voted for Donald Trump that I absolutely love, and I try to understand what their viewpoint is. I have people who are very progressive, and I try to understand what their viewpoint is. It's up to you to understand the other person's viewpoint and try to find some common bonds to build a new society. It starts with your family, then your neighbors, then your coworkers, and it will spread.
Thank you. I want to try and get to several of these others. I'm going to ask that you respond with a minute and a half if possible. What if we view generating local news as a bottom-up, community-based effort, as Ann Kinsel suggested? Okay, and I'm not sure how this is a question, but we should view that effort as a central pillar of democracy. In other words, do you think that local news is the pillar of a good democracy? And if we're having trouble getting local news out, what can we do about it? I mean, in other words, if we can't, if we're not going to the citizens and getting their information out and what's happening in the local areas, then are we cutting off that pillar that supports our democracy?
So I would say we should never underestimate the importance of journalists and their training. And if you want to know what happens when everyone's a journalist, I would say look at Ames People, which is a Facebook page where everybody thinks they know what's happening, and they don't know. And what is so shocking on a platform like Ames People, or any kind of platform where people just guess or suggest or make up, is that those are the same people who know how to get the right information. Those are the same kinds of voices that when they really truly have a question will come over to a City of Ames platform and ask. But they troll in these dark, weird spots, and they stir things up. And so everybody being a journalist doesn't work for me, because there's no rules in that world, and there's no goal in that world. And so I think we need to find a different path. I wish I knew the answer. There's a lot smarter people than me here, and I hope we can find it, because I think we're in a system that isn't working, and we need a new model.
Thank you. Well, another response, it says that since an informed citizenry is essential for the functioning of democracy, what do you feel about the state of New York discussing having public funding for local news and news reporters?
Well, do we really think that's going to make people happy? I mean, we talked earlier about the mistrust of things, and I guess I have a hard time envisioning the citizenry, informed or not, looking at that and saying, well, that's not about me, because people no longer separate their government from their politics. So Susan here represents a government who is highly dedicated to our everyday lives. Whether the water comes out of my tap or not isn't a political issue, right? And I don't care if the person who's running the water plant is a Republican or Democrat, or what they think about Trump or Biden or anything. I just want the water to be there, okay? So if we don't have people who can't separate that, I don't know where we go from there, local news or not.
I think the issue is less about government funding and more about government intervention in companies that we rely on to disseminate the news. For example, Facebook changes its algorithm so that news organizations aren't as high on your feed as your friends who are saying whatever they want to talk about. They also change algorithms quite frequently. So 1 month it's, giving videos a better play, and the other month it's giving photo posts a better play. So, it's impossible to keep up. So I think, our executive editor, Carol Hunter, at the Des Moines Register, and she's over all the Gannett papers in the Plains, wrote a really good editorial about this on how those corporations really are what is affecting getting news to the public. And there could be government intervention in that.
Anyone else?
Social media, Facebook in particular, should be paying the news organizations for the stories they steal. And if they even gave us micro payments, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Newsrooms would be robust. I mean, why pay for news when you get it for free, right? And that's been the issue for a long time. I'm going to tell you what I envision. That's not going to come true, but there is a path for this. I envision making journalism a general requirement for everyone in college, and maybe even in high school. And that's because if everyone is a journalist, they have to understand what our standards are. I envision those people creating content for local organizations so that they actually report the news like a reporter might. I think that's a possibility in the future, but only if we stop making journalism a major for the professions and start making it for the general population who holds a broadcast station in their pocket. If we can do that, we can train the populace to interact and provide content to news organizations that is not about opinion, not about editorializing, not about sectarian society. There's really hope. I have great hope for Generation Z. I want to tell you, of all the generation, I'm 70 years old, this is my 43rd year in higher education. No generation has impressed me more than Generation Z. They are committed to so many wonderful ethical things that if you have people in that age bracket, nieces, nephews, whatever, just encourage them to keep their zeal, because we all have to die for them to take over, all right? And I tell my students, they say, when is this going to end, whatever problem? I say, don't worry, we'll die soon, and then after we die, then you can have more of a voice, all right? But I think Generation Z holds the future, and I would like to hear what you have to say about that.
I hope we do. I can't be sure of that, but I would just add, I don't think we all have to serve as journalists. I think people need to be trained in what journalists do. So that is looking at an event or a fact and trying to evaluate it in an unbiased manner. We all don't have to reproduce these stories, but we do need the ability to look at headlines and look at articles and identify when there is bias, when there are potential inaccuracies, and then seek those out ourselves. So I don't necessarily see it as that we all need to become journalists, but we all need to be, in an age where media just consumes our lives, we all need to at least be thinking critically like one.
Well, as I'm sitting here, I'm starting to resent as a taxpayer that people can go through 12 or 16 years of schooling and they haven't learned that trick.
Media literacy is lacking.
So I think they are teaching internet literacy. I believe that is a class that's being offered now, and it's giving kids those tools to interpret what they are picking up off the internet. Is it legitimate, and is it trustworthy, and are they comparing it against other sources? I'm seeing signs that those courses are being offered. And my youngest kid is in high school, but I'm starting to see a trend in that, and I think that's what it's going to take.
That's great.
Okay, I'm going to cut it from here. There's two more questions, and one of them, maybe you could send an email online or whatever, but it says, one of you said the League of Women Voters, and I didn't sure remember did. One of you said the League of Women Voters could be helpful in meeting the desire for local news. How could the League of Women Voters help the situation? I'm assuming tonight is one way we're helping. We have a tradition of observing, but do not have a method for reporting what we do. In other words, is there any way that you think the League could do more?
Well, at KHOI, we have a number of groups that come on once a month, and Carolyn and John Kloss are part of that. We have a segment where we go over issues that are pertinent to the League of Women Voters. Is that real journalism? I'm not sure. But are we helping to put out the things that are important to that organization? Yeah, at KHOI, we can do that.
Well, I think the league has played a critical role in attending city council meetings, acting as a watchdog on policy decision makings, weighing in when there's a community-wide issue. Those are the things I would hope would continue. Those are really important for balance.
The final question is, which newspaper, print or online, should I refer to get the most factual news? And you all raise your
Never
hands.
one.
Hey, the New York
Do you mean
Times.
of us? Are we being pitted against each other?
They're asking the panel, so is there any comment? on
You're
that?
not going to get local news, but the best newspapers, the New York Times, forget about the opinion people. They tarnish that with political views. They have 16 columnists on the New York Times. Many of them espouse political positions. They have 1,700 reporters on the ground. That is amazing. And they have a paywall, and if you want free things, you'll get it in a newsletter. They have really perfected what journalism should be. Washington Post is very good. I put the New York Times right in the middle for objective reporting. Washington Post is a little bit to the left, Wall Street Journal is a little bit to the right, NPR is a little bit to the left, but they are the news organizations that have world-class reporters. Now, world-class reporters on a local level are hard to find because they go elsewhere. And so it comes back to what the League of Women Voters should be mostly concerned about, and that is free and fair elections. And free and fair elections are safeguarded by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, NPR, to a degree the Atlantic. There's a whole bunch that are in the objective middle because the margins are too low in the middle and it's easier to align opinion with partisan politics. You just pay talking heads rather than reporters. But that center is as strong as it has ever been.
I think the question was more about, should you read news online or in print? And I would say as long as you're reading it from a source that you trust,
Yeah.
either option is good. I mean, as long as you're reading the news, period.
I would say that great journalism comes from good citizens. That if we don't have people who are willing to take on the duty of citizenship, we're never going to have great journalism spreading information across the country.
I would add also, don't forget to, even though I said, when you read an article, you don't want to think of the reporter, but once you're done coming to your own conclusion, find that journalist and follow them regularly. There's plenty of phenomenal reporters and editors in Iowa, such as Aaron Murphy, Tom Barton, Kathy Obradovich, Clark Kaufman. I could list them for days. Find them and truly support them, even like sharing them on social media, that helps greatly too. I don't think there's enough, a lot of times the articles get the highlights, which is definitely the point, but the long-term support is supporting the journalists and the entities they work for.
Okay, thank you. In summary, we've had a lively discussion covering many aspects of the media and local news. We have had several solutions to increasing local news presented, and hopefully we can find a way to develop those ways. We must continue to keep our democracy vibrant and ongoing. We thank all of our panelists for taking the time to participate in the discussion, and thank the audience for taking the time to come and share their input. As a league, we want to thank the library, Ames Library, for providing this wonderful, helping us set up and do all the technology for it. So thank you.
Thank you all.
I don't know. Am I on? There we are. This is our president, by the way, Carolyn Fives.
Yes. So I would like to say, like Michael Boucher has said, get out and vote, and there's satellite locations that I'm in here. Please pick